Hi, I would like to talk to you about the new superpower feature in JCB. This new feature allows you to make use of some of the already well established freedoms within PHP and the larger world of code. So it's not really that new, it's just new to how we implement it within Joomla and now with the help of JCB. Creating classes and basically building applications in Joomla has always had a challenge in adding extra classes. And with this new power area in JCB, we're able to do that. And with the new superpower aspect, we're able to scale that into a global distribution method, kind of. So, without saying more about it, since explanation just doesn't do it, let me show you what I mean. First, I'm going to just simply install JCB onto this testing website. So we start with a blank installation. Now it's important to note that JCB now, since version 3.1.24, actually loads all the plugins and activates them for you. If you did an installation before this time, you may need to still do this manually. So make sure that your plugins is both enabled and linked with JCB's global options area. If you don't understand what that all means, then search through the tutorials. There is a tutorial showing you how to do that. So I'm going to assume that your installation is basically have the plugins enabled and is up to date Joomla 3.1, sorry, JCB 3.1.24. We will be releasing 3.2 within the next few weeks, or I hope, and it will be a phenomenal step forward. Whereas where we are now, we're busy bringing in features into JCB that gives us that ability to reinvent ourselves towards the migration to Joomla 4. Now, if we open the power area now, there is really nothing here. We've slimmed down the extension. We realize that if we keep on adding all our new features that are actually shipped in power, the power area, not only is it hard to actually keep that up to date, but it also bloats the extension. So the new superpower area is actually going to take care of all this for us. It's going to have a feature called init once it's fully established, with which you can pull in all the core superpowers into your JCB instance. Once you've made changes to some of those or you've made changes to some repository, you could use the sync command and sync selected classes up to what you've done offline or on the repository side. You also have a feature to reset a class so that when for some reason you're diverged from the original class and you want to go back to how it was, we added this reset feature as well. So these buttons don't yet work, but they will soon start working, and they form part of this new superpower functionality. And yet, superpowers works without you really knowing anything about these buttons at all. So to demonstrate that, we're going to use our demo component here and open that up. And we're going to add a very simple class here that can help us demonstrate the power that I'm talking about. So going back to the component build repository, which you can find by going to git.vdm.dev/Joomla, and then, or just up to dev, and then click on this icon, this Joomla icon would open this main repository. This is where the code is maintained, this is where the issues are. And if you go one step up to the Joomla link and scroll down, you should see a superpower repository. Now you could search for it in here if it's not visible, because as things update, the repositories may slide out of view. If you open the superpower repository, you would see that it gives you a short explanation of what you can expect to find here, and then it has a list of all the powers that are in this specific repository. This is all built by JCB. So going forward from now, when you make use of this area in JCB, for which I will make an extra tutorial, I want to first just give you the application, kind of how does it now work. But how to build this and how to have your own superpowers, your own repositories, for that we'll need to make some more tutorials. But it's quite simple, and it's not even that hard because JCB does most of the work. This whole repository was completely dynamically generated by JCB. The code was moved into folders, the naming, the everything, even these UML class declarations, all was done by JCB automatically out of the box. No manual labor needed at all. So even if you open one of these classes, let's say the array helper class, it gives you a UML breakdown of what methods are in this class that are public and what are their details about. And you could also look at the code itself to see how does it actually work. And it has every other part of the details needed so the JCB can easily pull this code back into itself when it's needed. So that's why there are more than one file here. This file, code.power, is the raw presentation of the code before any placeholder updating or language transitioning or anything in the compiler was done. So this is the raw snapshot of what's in your database the day this power was built. And so that's what we will pull in to your project if you were to make use of it from outside of its current existence. So that's what this settings file is, what shows you basically the details of this class. And if there are any linking that is required, that it needs other classes to work, this is what also would be the place to see that. So for example, if I was to take let's say the JSON helper class, and I open the settings, you'd see that it has load selection and 1, 2, 3 other classes linked to it. So that if we was to use this class in our project, JCB would know that it needs those as well and will pull those classes in as well. So this linking mechanism is really necessary to automatically couple all necessary classes together in a very simple way, actually. So going back to our extension, we want to just add an extra layer here just for fun to kind of validate, are we dealing with an integer or not? And so for that we have a class called string helper. Now this is the key that we want to use. It's the SPK, but this SPK is inactive. Now I want to explain to you that because it kind of could throw you out. The SPK that is active has 3 underscores this side of this number and 3 underscores this side. So basically 3 underscores and then the number. The reason why these are inactive is otherwise JCB, when it's building this, actually picks up this again and refactors it into the actual names of the class. So it will actually update this to say array helper and update this to say field helper. So to avoid that from happening and the recursion of all that, I decided to have a deactivated version, which is just 2 underscores. And to activate therefore this SPK, you need to add 3 underscores. So using this specific function in our class here, we will do the following. Put that there, and now we want to say OR here. We want to know which function can we use to check whether this is a string, because if it's a string we must convert it to an integer, right? So that we have a timestamp stir to time. So we want an integer, we don't want a string. Now we can click here on details, and it has a UML layout of the function, and you can see there's a check. So check if it's a string with a length. Okay, so that's the one we want. So we're going to just, because it's an abstract class, we can also see that. We don't need to use new. but we could. If it was a normal class, we could instantiate it, but that's another topic about dependency injection. I made a tutorial about that. You need to rather do the dependency injection approach, okay? So that's a topic on its own. But yeah, here for our demonstration, I could use the check function, and basically what I want to do is make sure that if this is a string, I want it to convert it to an integer. And that's what it's going to check. Now I could have done it there, there, and there. I just want to demonstrate the feature of the superpower. So we made use of that. We want to check that this now has 3 underscores. This is how we activate this SPK. The moment that has 3 underscores, JCB is going to pick that up and it's going to do its thing. So save and close. Now, if we still go back here to powers, we still see there's nothing there. I go to the compiler and just need to clear this out, the previous test. And now I'm going to compile the extension. So we haven't touched any of the configurations on this point. We've simply taken a SPK from an existing superpower. It needs to be the superpower repository. So this Joomla superpower repository is the default, you could say, lowest level of all superpowers. So when it searches for a superpower, this is the lowest level. So if it can't find it in any of yours, it will fall down all the way to this level. So this is the core base. And this obviously would be the place where I would grow a lot of code that I want to be able to be available to all of you. But in simplicity, you could actually override any of the classes that I'm using here by forking this class into your own account, basically your own account here on our system. And then because you're sharing the same global unique ID for that class and you link it into JCB, which I will show in another tutorial how to link your own superpowers, then JCB would, by searching just by the order of your listing, when the first place where it finds that power, it will pull it in from there and stop the search. So this gives us that overriding possibility, so that you could take code that I've written and fork it and change it the way you like, and never need to be concerned about how I might change mine. Now I understand if I improve mine, you may want to use that improvement, but then you are just doing a merge into your own code base again, making the necessary changes, and basically you're decoupled from me, and you can start growing JCB and its behavior the way you want it. I think that's a very powerful application. Now, when we look at this, what has happened, we will see that now there are 3 powers. So when we loaded the string helper, it actually has linked to it the component helper class. And if we open the component helper class, the component helper class is basically what is used to get information from your components, global options, and all sorts of other fancy tricks, so that it gets pulled in automatically. We also see that here at the bottom we have the helper array linked, so that when this string class is loaded, we also want the helper, array helper class to be loaded, because it's also needed, but it doesn't need to be added to the use namespace because it's kind of sharing the same namespace, right? This is the namespace. So it has pulled in the project into your JCB. You can now edit it, you can change it. When you change its version, of course, it's going to change the global unique ID, so that there's a global unique ID key for every version of this class. Just keep that in mind. You're able to add it to your own list of superpowers, which we won't go into depth now. And then there's our licensee declaration, which you should not change unless you completely change the class, of course. And yes, that all said, it's pulled it into your JCB instance, but it is also, if I go to where this package is found, just hold on for a minute. So here's the package. I'm going to open that up. We'll see that it has now a library folder. It has the JCB superpowers. It's actually got the VDM.Joomla. It's got utilities. It's got components, array helper, and there's our string helper class. So JCB automatically pulled all those classes into your project just by you adding that key. The next thing that JCB has automatically done is it's also added the SPF loading that is required. So if you go to your helper class, which in this case is the demo class here, okay, let's see, and we scroll down, we see that it automatically loaded the SPK auto register. It automatically added your search, and basically because the helper class is the part of the entry point. So if you look at your demo folder, you see that your helper class is always being pulled in before it starts any execution of your extension. That's now in Joomla 3, of course. And so this means that your namespacing is always going to be included whenever you work through your extension. If you're going to be using classes in another extension that's linked to this extension, you should consider using what is known as the plugin power, or the power that loads, the plugin that loads your powers for you via plugins. Now, why that is better is because plugins in Joomla is triggered before extensions, so before your component at least. So, so that means it takes you one step up, so that that event takes place before your extension or a component in this matter or module is triggered. Now, if you do not know about how to build that plugin, there is a tutorial about that, and make sure to go look at this in our tutorials on YouTube. Okay, so we've basically demonstrated the simplicity of how the new SPK integration works. There's one key factor that I should have not overlooked. So let me just open up that area again. Hold on. Okay, and that is the fact that we added that code to our helper class. And although I already showed you how it added the, wait, this is the wrong file. It added the auto loading code for us. What you should see is that it also I forgot that it was in the site, the site side, not the admin side, helper class that we targeted. So if we come here, we would see that it added that for us the string helper class automatically. So we didn't need to do any header linking. It automatically added the string helper class, and it gave it a unique key name so that it doesn't collide with the other classes that are already being loaded. So it picked up that there is already a class with the name string helper, so it changed it to utilities string helper, so that it is more identifiable. And then in the code, it used that key to now convert our code to the correct implementation. So it took care of all the pain, all the linking of the pulling the code in, writing it into your file, putting it into the header, and all of that is part of what the new superpowers is all about. Now, if that was interesting, now let me demonstrate to you the next step, which makes it even more interesting. So, let's say you have a set of code that you have set up previously in another JCB instance, and you have followed the tutorial, which I will still make, that pushes that code into a repository eventually, and now you're starting a new project and you want to make use of that code, and you followed the good approach of creating service providers and linking them all to a factory class, so that you basically have a containerized environment for your classes. Then the next functionality now becomes very possible. And the way I'll demonstrate that is to make use of the Gitee framework or wrapper that we wrote, with which you can interact with any Gitee system. So the complete API is being basically made available to you through this set of classes. There's only a few little things you need to do to actually enable that feature now in JCB. The first thing is you go to options, you go to the superpowers area, and you activate superpowers. And then once you've done that, you say own superpowers, basically, which means that you are going to list powers that you want to include beyond the base superpowers of JCB. Now, there is even the option that you include it from another custom Gitee instance, but do take note that if you do that, you must fork our core powers over to that system. Otherwise, you know, if your power repository doesn't have those core functions or classes rather, it will fall through the floor and it will break, because we are going to design JCB that it's going to fall back to many of its core powers, and it's going to need those core powers at any point of time as we continue forward. So the core power repository will become critical as the foundation of JCB. This means if you do use the custom Gitee approach, we're going to ask you to actually tell us what is the repository path of the core superpowers. So as you can see, you can still have to fork it over to your Git system, which is obviously easy to do, and then be able to note that down so that we can still fall back to that defaults. But if you're going to use our system, which is obviously more affordable and convenient, doesn't cost anything, you're able to set up a few things here. First of all, like I said, the repository, the owner. So in this case, we want to now add a repository that is called Gitee. Let's see, where is it? There it is. This is the repository that we want to add, and this is the path, Joomla/Gitee, and we're going to target the master branch. So here we're going to say Gitee, and this is going to be Joomla. And here we don't need to say anything. If we leave it as default, it will default to the main branch. So even if that wasn't if the main branch is master, if you named your main branch differently, then just fill that in, because currently default means master in the system. I should have made that master, been more explicit. Anyway, then in the next tutorial, we're going to explain to you what this local power repository path is all about and what that role would be going forward with JCB. I'm not going to do that now, otherwise this tutorial gets way too long. So to cutting it short, we'll get back to that. And having done all that, we save and close, and we now have linked this global repository called Gitee to that system. I can now scroll down here and look for the factory, and there's the factory, and there's the superpower of the factory. So I'm going to just use the abstract factory, which is the basically the entry point for all these classes. So all these classes that are used to access the Gitee API are completely finished, and they are having their own namespaces, and as you can see, it has its own UML for every one of those classes. You could open any of them to see what they look like. So if we take comments, for example, it shows you that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 methods, and how each one of those methods are used. And if you need more, you could even look at the code like we've shown before, and it gives you the actual code. And here is the code that will be pulled into your instance. Now, if there were language strings or other custom code placeholders or anything like that, they will still be in their raw state so that you can override and implement them in your application any way you like. which I'm not sure if you understand exactly what that all means, but if you're experienced with custom code in JCB, then custom coding is a very powerful feature that's still functional within Powers even. Okay, so having said all that, we're going to just use the factory because that's the only part we need to pull into our project. I'm not going to implement an actual implementation because then I need to do a little bit more house cleaning, and I just want to demonstrate the power of what we've got here by just pasting that power here in the comments and then activating it by adding the 3 underscores. That's going to be enough for JCB to realize, okay, you want this class, so I need to pull it into this helper class. It's going to put the namespacing in for us. It's going to do everything. So save and close, and then we go to the compiler and we compile our component. It may take long the first time because it's going to discover the extension, it's going to pull all of the code, and since we're using the factory, it's going to start by including all the service providers and all the classes linked to the service providers and everything. It's going to take care of all of that. It doesn't take that long though, and so at the same token, don't try to pull in too much at once. I don't know what server limitations you might have, but with my testing so far, the Gitty class, though it is a lot of classes and actually a lot of code, still manages. Okay, that took quite a while, and just wait, it will eventually complete. Now I see that there was one power that it couldn't find, and it actually will note that. So if there is a power that it was trying to load and it was unsuccessful in finding it, and it's a legitimate power, it will show you the actual global unique ID that it did not find. And why this is useful is that you can actually go to our Gitty system and you can check where is this power and why it maybe didn't find it. So let me show you. So I realized, okay, this power is actually part of the JCB compiler, and it's actually the factory interface. And what I will do, just to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen, is I will link it to be also part of the Gitty powers. It's very easy for me to do that, so it should get resolved with the next people using this function. Okay. The point is, if we now look at our extension, things would have considerably changed. So let's see that. Again, looking at our zip file, we go to libraries, JCB, and powers, and now we see there's a new folder called Joomla Gitty. We open that and we see that all those classes are there. There's the factory class, that is the one we included. But because the factory class is linked to the services and the services are linked to all these other powers, they basically pulled all that code into your project simply with that key. And it's included it into your project so that if you were to go, now we again targeted the helper on the site side. If you open that up, you'd see that it will also have updated your linking with the auto load register, and it would have included it here as part of the class. And had you used it in a meaningful way, let's see. Yeah, it just used the word factory because that's the end. If there was another factory class in your use statements, it would have used Gitty factory like it did with the string here. And so it just updated. So that placeholder is basically updated by the class's name as declared in the use case above. So here it did the utility string helper, and the other one was the factory. So now we could basically have used this factory directly in our helper class, or for that matter, in any other custom code area that is open in JCB and ready to use. So the power now to basically start using powers in your project simply through this SPK string implementation is really large. Now I understand it's not necessarily the if you read the code without this updated version being visible, this long key doesn't make sense, right? It's kind of challenging to sort of keep track of that. But this is what we have right now. I'm not sure if we would grow it into a different implementation just yet. It's going to work for us going forward, especially because many of us, we have written custom code all across our projects, and now that custom code needs to move to powers, and everywhere where we use that functions, we now want to move over to a class and to a class implementation method, right? And this approach can do a search replace using the SPKs because here is the SPK already activated. So it's already got the 3 underscores. So we can use this SPK key now anywhere in our code where we want this specific class. And we can then also directly use the, in this case, the create method to achieve our objectives. So it kind of gives us that first step of moving out of the current because what's one of our biggest challenges is the fact that our code is not namespaced. And so we have functions and we have even other classes that are in our code implemented without namespacing being considered. Whereas with this approach, we are now basically moving our code into the world of namespacing, and it will make it so much easier to do this. And also, not to mention the fact that we can now include code into our code base, and although we move it around, JCB will go search for that code and bring it to your instance without you really doing anything. It updates everything, it does the linking. As you can see here, the code, it extends the API, and the API itself was also pulled into the project, and all the classes that it depends on and everywhere that it's going to be used, everything automatically integrated and updated into your JCB instance simply by using that factory SPK activated key. Wow, that was a lot. I'm sure that there might still be more questions, but this would serve as a good baseline for the first step of introducing you to the new superpowers in JCB. Until next time, take care.